we'll get more of the same and worse, because the more they think no one is watching, the more they'll try to get away with what they've been gotten away with and expand on that. And I think it's going to get worse.
And this looks like a real danger now, doesn't it? Bill, what do you see?
Oh no, yeah. I mean, it's like one of the truisms of Albany is that because they feel like they can get away with almost anything because they know that no one's really paying attention. And another way of looking at it is that they respond to the people who they hear from. They don't hear that much from their constituents, except when a constituent has a complaint about something very specific. What they do hear from are the people who can afford to have a lobbyist in Albany, the people who can afford to organize a phone bank so that they can set up a 1-800 number and say, call this number and tell your legislator to vote yes on this bill. And you call that number, they get your zip code or whatever, and they patch you through to your assemblyman and your senator. That takes money, and that's what we talk about when we talk about the impact of special interests in Albany. They have the money to pay the lobbyists, to do the phone banking, to contribute to the campaigns. The average voter isn't paying attention, isn't speaking out, and so they respond to the squeaky wheels.
We almost never get a letter from an ordinary citizen about state government. It's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. That tells you something right there.
Yeah, it sure does. How about any questions?
I just would like to, Gene, introduce two people. One who has been here for several of our events in many capacities. These two individuals are running for the hottest congressional seat in the state of New York, and the so-called Facela seat, which could be almost as important as the state senate. And the one who has been here for several events is a city councilman now running for Congress, Honorable Michael McMahon. And the other one, he's the Democrat, is the Republican candidate running for the same seat, the so-called Facela seat, the Honorable Bob Strinari. And believe it or not, even though I live on the other side of the Verrazano Bridge, my part of Brooklyn, Bensonhurst and Bay Ridge, is in this particular district. Good luck, gentlemen. And Sue, thank you very much for preparing all this. Questions and answers.
We must have provoked some questions.
Could I just say one thing?
Sure.
I want to apologize to the former assemblyman because I pointed out when Mr. McMahon came in and I looked right at you and I haven't seen you in a long time. I haven't seen you in a long time. I'm sorry. I announced I was a Democrat, but I'm not that bad a Democrat.
I think I saw a hand, one and then two.
In a presidential election, the New York Times and even the self-proclaimed best political team on TV has been taking claims made by candidates and putting them in context and then saying what the facts are. I wonder, has there been anything comparable in coverage of state news, state elections?
That happens in statewide races. You'll see that when a candidate, especially for governor, if they run an ad, you'll sometimes see a fact checking on that ad. By and large, it's not going to happen very often in the New York City media for a state legislative race, just because there are so many of them. What I think what the media typically do on legislative races is they pick the 5 or 6 that seem like they're really competitive, where there's a serious challenger, and they'll do a profile of that race. One story, medium to long, and that'll be pretty much it. There might be a flare-up, an accusation of wrongdoing, physical violence might break out and you'll get spot news, but by and large your coverage of state legislative races boil down to one kind of omnibus profile of the race a few weeks before the big vote, and then an endorsement. on the editorial page.
I have to say that the Advance covered a one-borough paper, and we cover legislative races very intensely, including an analysis of what people are claiming, what candidates are claiming, and the other person's response, and we try to dig in and verify what's accurate in any given claim.
So many legislative and congressional seats are so safe that there isn't really, when it comes down to it, much of a contest. And one of the reasons that the race right now is getting so much coverage is because there's definitely going to be somebody new. And that is a sure thing, and it brings coverage to it. And this just isn't true in so many races that take place. You had a question, then the person behind you.
This is in regards to how politics are covered. While I feel like the coverage is mostly internal and you have a major affair with individuals, there seems to be a lack of coverage from external problems, such as Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, Max Weber. They all agreed that political structure and social structure was all controlled by a base, an economic base, which is easily noticeable in Manhattan's corporations, even in Albany, everywhere, every state. I think we're well aware of the scandals and such and the funds that exchange hands internally within state government, national government, and such. However, there seems to be a lack of coverage with these corporations or outside sources that pay, fund, influence state government into doing their bidding. I think we're well aware that it goes on, but there seems to be a severe lack of coverage for it. And I feel like that is the most important thing that we're dealing with here, is that the state government is controlled by the economy, as well as national government, city government, however you want to look at it. Do you have any viewpoints on how the economy affects this, the coverage of it, scandals in relation?
By the economy, you mean business interests, special interests that
having an influence
that
on
hire lobbyists, hire the right lobbyists, make the right contributions. Well, geez, it's certainly, you know, that's my bread and butter. I think that's the bread and butter of any investigative reporter, is to look at, to follow the money is the basic premise of the business. And do we do enough of it? No, we don't do enough of it. And are there endless stories in Albany about that? I mean, I think there are literally endless stories about that. But I think, you know, I'm sure that every paper tries to take a look at the money. You know, my wife has complained for nearly 40 years that I bring campaign contribution filings to bed with us. And, but I think they're hot. So I love to read them, and you know, I certainly write many stories about where the money comes from and the consequences of it. But can you ever catch up with the money? No. Can you ever catch up with how many times it's compromised somebody? I don't think so, not in Albany. But do we try? I think we do try, and I think that's true of every paper in town tries to do that.
I don't disagree with your premise at all about the influence of business in government, special interests in government. And I think it is covered, as Wayne says, but I don't know how much of a dent it's been making on people's consciousness. I don't think they get outraged as much as we think they should. And unfortunately, to a large degree, it's been legitimized, that people feel that, oh, this is the way politics is done. Whether they're cynical or jaded, I don't know, but they think that's an accepted part of politics and they can't do anything about it.